So we're gonna start the second part of the DPS class, which is gonna be talking about Magicka now. It is specifically for you know. But by the way, this is specifically for Magicka, and the the person who, again, this idea coming out of mine with the min maxing thresholds was originally not my idea, but I've kind of expanded on it. The originally coming up with this whole DPS class thing was Hoff's idea. So who's Hoff? I don't have his username added to my friends list anymore, unfortunately, because we just kind of lost contact. I wanted to keep contact with him, but we ended up talking to few in between, and we kind of missed the opportunity. He's from Kings and Thieves, and he's been a long time theory crafter in ESO on NA. But similarly to Gilliam the Rogue and a lot of other people who theory craft on NA, they have a lot of tough. They have a really hard in NA. There's a really tough time for people to try to convince theory crafters to convince people to be running what in trials. It's because generally NA always swap out people between teams. So depending on how connected you are with playing and how frequent you are to playing the same people, it's gonna affect how these the stuff like the penetration, which we talked about, is gonna affect you in particular. Or when you running precise instead of a sharpened staff, or you running your other statistics like compared to Nernholm and whatever. Because that has always been an argument only set among people who are constantly playing with one another. Because those people aren't thinking about self-buff DPS anymore. Those people are thinking about group buff DPS, because it's all about the trial skill at that point. So let's we also talk a little bit more about traits in this one video. So I think we kind of tell it long enough. So Magicka thresholds, again, minimum, you don't want to try to go way past below the minimum. It's unhealthy. It's just gonna give a lot of detriment to you, and you don't want to try to go above this maximum. And I will talk a little bit about necropotence, which is kind of an odd exception, or for Nightblades who tend to have a lot more crit than others. So maximum Magicka, I'll just go ahead and relog as well while I talk about that. So maximum Magicka, you want to try to keep the minimum at about I would say 3.7k, because I know that there are people who fall about that low, especially if they're not using Altmer or Dunmer in particular. But there should be no problem hitting 3.8k. Is about the average, by the way. And you don't want to go above 4.1k unless you're using necropotence, right? And on a necropotence setup, you would be hitting for more than 48k sometimes. It's very rare in particular, but this patch can still go more than 48k. And there are some people who can bring it up to 52k. But those are really extreme numbers, and those only apply specifically for the Magicka Warren Necropotence build and the Sorcerer Necropotence build. And even then, on both my Sorcerer and Magicka Warren, I typically don't go that high. I always try to push it below. Again, why? Because you're wasting too many resources that could be put into crit. You could have put into something else. So now let's talk about the spell power that you're supposed to have after getting buffed. Okay, and by the way, yes, Magicka Templars generally tend to have a bit more spell power. So you want to keep at the minimum about I would say 2.1k, 2.2k. This is unbuffed, but if you're buffed up, you want to get it to approximately 2.8k. I say 2.8k is the minimum that you should go for. And then the maximum you should not go past is 4.3k. That's a pretty large dynamic, I know, but Magicka characters, especially depending on whether you're Magicka Templar or Magicka Nightblade, your spell power tends to be really either super high or really the kind of looking on the low side. So Magicka classes tend to work, DPS tends to work that way, kind of. So okay, let's talk about the crit chance. So the crit chance minimum, you want to go at about 58%. Okay? And then the maximum you want to go about is no more than 62%. I think the crit chance is the only thing as crit chance and damage modifiers is kind of weird, right? Because for stam, the crits is what's going for stam, but for Magicka, it's the raw stats. So you want to go get a bit more higher. Whether for crit chance, you want to stay within those numbers. Even on the crit chance for mine, it's I keep it at 59% and then 62% when I swap bars. I do have a lower spell crit setup for when I'm using, you know, spell essence of spell power versus essence of Magicka, because you do get spell crit, and that's for setups where I'm not using in the light as well. Okay, now let's talk about the damage modifier, the crit damage modifier. So of course, again, total, which is what I was speaking about. So you normally, if you're like a Magicka Stork or something, you don't really have a lot of this. You actually only have about 165 total damage if you're critting. Okay, it's actually pretty low. And then if you are critting and let's say you're wearing twice one star, yes, there are still twice one star Magicka builds, and you know, you have all those numbers pumped up, you actually don't go past that high. You actually only just keep it between all the way up to 185 or 195%. It's not that high. It's kind of low for Magicka. Alright? This is because you have better things to put in. Now for penetration for Magicka, penetration is kind of something that's really odd for Magicka because you inherently get penetration. So I linked my I'll link it again, so just so that you guys can see how much penetration I have. Is it written in the yeah, it's written in Superstar, so I'll link it at the top just to show you guys an example of what my Magicka Templar is. My Magicka Templar, whoops, wrong thing to link. That was not porn. Anyways, so I linked it over here. My penetration, as you guys can see, it's only at about 8.5k or 11.5k. Okay, so it's like, why is mine so high? So I actually do put points into spell erosion. Because Magicka, again, you get a lot of penetration just from two things: from your light armor passive, the concentration, which gives you 4.884, and then you get from your destruction staff passive, which works automatically like as if you were having a mace for stam, which is what is it again? Penetrating magic. Your destruction staff abilities ignore 10% of enemy spell resistance, and I believe that is after all of the penetration. So Magicka DPS typically has a lot more penetration than Magicka DPS by default. So you can kind of make up for the lack of what's that? You can make up for the lack of group penetration, because the only source of group penetration that you have from Magicka is what Alkosh Crushers, really, and Elemental Drain, and that's pretty much it. You don't really get a lot of group penetration. In terms of group penetration, you don't get a lot of access. Stam get Thunder Flame and Nightmare's Gaze. Lucky for them, not lucky for Magicka. So you actually have to put points into your champion points. Now in a trial setting, and depending on not you're running precise and infuse or whatever the heck, you actually need to take out more into your champion. You need to put more into champion points if you're using precise. So I'm using 43 into spell erosion this setup for. You guys can see it through my Superstar. And again, why do I have that high penetration? I have basically 16k penetration because I run Elemental Drain in you know, Maelstrom Arena. So in a trial setting, same thing. I mean, I just dump out points from my spell erosion if somebody is constantly running Alkosh Crushers. But you know, those only have a 50% uptime and they're not exactly the best sometimes. So let's talk a little bit about Magicka Nightblades and Magicka Swords in general, and Wardens, because the Necropolis build tends to have a little bit odd stats and Magicka Nightblades tends to have a little bit odd stats. So, and Templars inclusive, because you got Nightblades and Templars in general, Stam or Magicka, you get 10% more critical damage modifier Okay, it's in your passive. It's in both hemorrhage and the what is that called? 222 is in piercing spear. So, anyways, necropotence builds. How do you thin up your statistics? How do you stay in the min-maxing thresholds if you're if you're running a Magical Nightblade in the light as well, and you're still using you're putting a lot of assassination skills on the same bar, because with Nightblades, each assassination skill they put on their bar, they also get spell crit, right? And if they put on in light there, or they're using potions, they get so much crit. It's a little bit way too high. And that's so this is something you can do. If you're running Infallible Aether, for example, if you're Magical Nightblade with that much crit, you can change over to Willpower. That's a small minor change that you can do, but it actually will gain you a little bit more consistent DPS. Just saying. But again, you don't get that multiplicative on your execute that you would using Minor Slayer on your execute. So just something to think of. If you feel like the fight is gonna be going a lot more frequently, or that you have better things to do than just think about execute on a Magical Nightblade, then just run Willpower. If you are running a Magical Sword and Necropotence and you have way too much Max Magicka, what can you do about it? Well, okay, if you have way too much Max Magicka, just move over to your Witch Mother's Brew. Another kind of option is that you could essentially get rid of any Moon Dancer gear, which gives you more, Max Magicka, and move over to Infallible Aether, or to be moving to Mother Sorrow. So, this is something I was testing on the last patch. I have not concluded, but just a hint. Some other people has. Yes, you don't need Mother Sorrow on your gear, but if you're using Willpower and Necropotence, you have so much Magicka that you don't have a lot of crit. Your access to crit has been basically denied because Thief has been nerfed for you. So you need to make sure that either A, if you're not running, if you're running pets and you're not running in a light, right? Because I know the bar setup, you don't have space for both pets in the light sometimes. Then you need to make sure to use potions that give you spell crit. You just need to get your crit up somehow. Okay? And if for whatever reason, you find yourself in a situation where you're low on the damage modifier, just put in an Elfborn to make up for the fact. Again, Magical Swords are kinda on the low side of DPS right now because of their lack in crit. Because after I told you guys the min-maxing and the min-maxing thresholds, you guys should be able to imagine that. Now, yes, I know that there are some people with BTS and they rock those hard 40k numbers or whatever. That is with a healer, okay, with some elemental drain and with synergies being passed on by somebody else. And even if it's not, some people are just kind of cheesing the dummy one way or another. If you look at I always ask for combat metrics parse. If their combat metrics parse has ridiculously high crit, like 80% crit on Magical Sword, with Necropotence and Willpower, something's wrong. Something's not right there. Somebody decided to do way a lot of parses, just a long time doing parses, or they maybe got lucky and got the one parse and they are just linking that one parse. So unless they can show proof, that they are actually getting it on average, I'm pretty sure that self-buff for Magical Swords, they don't go past even the really godly ones. Okay, let's just talk about people who are first tier. People who have been running this game and playing exclusively Magical Swords for a really long time now. It's not unnatural that those people have already perfected the rotation to the inch, for the millimeter of it. And it's normal that those people get at least 36k, even 36k, 37k, even they get nerfed. And even with the last patch, for those people to go 40k, because they worked for it. Okay, for the people who, like myself, I only play Magical Sword when I need a Magical Sword, or when my group needs a Magical Sword. Somebody like me usually only peaks at about the 32k. That's where I stop at. I usually don't go work on it after that much, even with the same setup that those other people are using. In fact, I don't even go down my gear for the most part. So just look forward to increasing your parses, paying attention to your rotation, because each patch, no matter what, your rotation will always kind of hold true. So, okay. let's talk about traits a little bit, and talk about when should you use precise and infuse, and when should you use your flame enchantment compared to your weapon and spell damage enchantment. Okay, so I'll give you an example one over here. Let's talk about Magica Nightblades again, because Magica Nightblades are really popular in this patch, right? So this goes out to Xavier or Willisco. You can try this and test it out, because I was going to test it out for myself, but I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks, as you guys already know, for at least 3 weeks anyways. Again, if your execute is on your dead slot staff bar, or basically not on your maelstrom bar, we're talking about the buff bar and the AoE bar, by the way, then you want to I think that it's honestly better if you're fighting bosses that are not gonna last that long, to be putting a infused weapon and spell damage over there, or precise. But if you're not going to be spending a lot of time executing, and you only have refreshing path on that bar, like the setup that you guys may have used from the link that I linked several weeks ago. You know, where you put the only damage skill you have on that bar is your refreshing path. So you're not going to be staying all that long on your dots bar and your buff bar. So in that case, you want to make sure to move. You want to put that as an infused weapon spell damage instead, not precise. Alright, so you want to be thinking about infused versus precise in a way that this is how you kind of sum it up. Enchantments have 2 types, right? Enchantments have your damage proc enchantments. You have your flame, your shock, your disease, poison, whatever, and then you have your statistics altering enchantments, which is like what, weaken, crushers, weapon spell damage, so on and so forth. The global cooldown for status affecting enchantments is 10 seconds. The global cooldown for damage proc enchantments are 5 seconds. So if infused, it will be lowered by 30%, torque spec by another 30%. So saying this, you kind of have to realize how often are you on that bar, and your rotation and your own style of putting on your own bar really affects what is the trait that it's going to be. Infused is useful in all situations, but infused really, if you're using it on your spammable bar, then you want to make sure that it's an infused and damage proc enchant. If you're not always on that bar, then you just leave it as a weapon and spell damage. Alright, and you can leave it as the what's that called again? You can leave it on infused and weapon spell damage. You're not always on that bar. If you're always on that bar, then you have more choices. You have precise. And then let's talk a little bit about Nirnhorn as well. And what is the oddity where you may actually be using Nirnhorn, and the other oddity is that you may be using charged. Now, if you have some kind of a status ailment, so status effect, what are status effects in the game, right? So what's the poison dot, the shock which procs concussed, burning, and then you have chilled. So of course, it should be obvious which one procs what. I shouldn't need to tell you guys that. But after all, minor vulnerability uptime has gone nerfed. It used to be 6 seconds, now it's only 4 seconds. Chill only 6 seconds to 4 seconds now. Those things have gone changed to the Haunts of the Reach patch. So if you're running a Magica Sword now, it becomes more so important. And by the way, charged is, if I'm not mistaken, it's as you cast it. So if let's say you drop down Liquid Lightning that's charged, all of the 1%, or rather 2% if you're using the Destruction Staff, then it's gonna get the extra 100% from charged? I can't remember. What's the modifier on charged again, Willis? Isn't it 100%, right?
Isn't it 200%?
Or is it 220? Let me just double check real quick, because I actually have a staff for it. Just double check here real quick. I have it on my Sorc, so I'll just check my Sorc. Log the Avram. Grobos charged. Yep, so golded out charge staffs gives an extra 220%. So if you're using that on a destruction staff, Savior, if you could kindly not do a DPS test right now. So you get 320% extra chance to proc your status effect if you're using a charged weapon, which is really effective. You need this on the sword because obviously a sword provides concussed and off balance to the group, and you need to have 100% uptime, and if you can provide it as 100% uptime, you don't need more than one Magicka sword. It's really simple. And you only need to be that one Magicka sword. Again, because off balance and concussed, the way it works, you shouldn't run more than one, okay? Preferably more than one, but if you can't help it and your Magicka sword just kind of needs practice or whatever, you need to run two Magicka swords and that's it. Okay? Because if having way too much uptime for the off balance and the concussed, which is the 18% damage for everybody who has the exploited passive, and then you have an extra 15% for stamina users who are using dual wield, right? So if you look at dual wield weapon, dual wield, look at the passive called Ruffian, you get once it levels is level 2. Hold on, let me just open my superstar and just kind of do it for the video real quick. Weapon, dual wield, Ruffian at 2 points in here, you get 15% damage bonus when attacking, stun, immobilize, disorient. Disorient being off balance, the same thing. So you get 33% damage bonus, base damage if you're using dual wield on a target that is getting off concussed and off balance by a sword. Really simple stuff. So, okay, that's why you need to be running, in the situation you need to be running charged. The only other situation I think that you need to be running charged is that if you, for whatever reason, you have a lot of people running elemental blockade of fire, right? So you have a lot of decays and you have a lot of mash blades. And for whatever reason, the boss does not have a high burning uptime. And this can happen. It's just what it is, because direct damage only procs that from so okay, so the way Cess effects procs has a chance of proccing, the probability, the chance is that direct by default without any modifiers from your destruction stat passive or charged or whatever, you have a 1% chance, only 1% chance on dots, and it's 5% chance on direct damage. Enchantments, right, when they go off, they have a 20% chance of putting status ailments. So, just do the math. It's when you have 200% chance and your destruction, which is, basically times 3. So if you 20% chance times 3, you basically get 60. If you get, 220 on your charge staff, then I think it's roughly 75% chance if you're using a gold charge weapon and you proc your enchant. So those are the kind of things you're going to be looking for because you're going to buff your group. And why you do that? Why you worried about charge? So why is charge a really good trait now? So if for you guys who don't know, who didn't take time to read your tooltip, the different blockades of elements actually give extra bonuses. So if you're using blockade of fire, you get 20% more damage for if the target was burning. So if you proc burning on the target, and then you use your blockade of fire, you actually get 20% more damage from your blockade of fire. And we all know how blockade of fire is the top of your DPS chart. Now, what are the ones? So, blockade of storms sets concussed enemies off balance. Obviously, why is this good? We just talked about it. And then if you're running a frost tank in general, or you're running as a DPS tank with a Magicka Warden, then you want to have a charged frost staff that have elemental blockade of frost on it, because it's basically it's over 70%, 60-70% uptime on choking talons. So it's an AoE mobilize, which is why you do that, because if targets are immobilized, you don't need to tank them. Welcome back, user. So if targets are immobilized, you don't need to tank them, and that's why they're important, right? Because for those of you who aren't doing VDSAs yet, who are not doing House of Fabrication yet, you guys don't know how important it is to debuff mobs. But they are generally there are a lot of issues that you need to start worrying about in there. And just hint, so some of you who think that stamina DPS is kind of behind, they are not, okay? In Vet Halls of Purification, people are looking for stam DPS to do it with. Because I don't want to spoiler it too much, but Magicka DPS actually get a mechanic they have to deal with that stamina DPS don't. Okay? Just giving you a little bit of a spoiler. Tiny spoiler. Okay. Anything else about Magicka DPS I did not mention? Or about traits on Wonderstones? Oh yes! So, if you're running a Necropotence build, and you already have crit, for whatever reason you're using Mother's Sorrow or whatever, right? And you have enough crit, you actually don't want to put into Shadow Mundus like you would if you're a stamina character, you're a stamina DPS. You want to be putting into, what is it? Let's just look at Wonderstones real quick. Yeah, so Wonderstones, you want to be putting into what is that gives max Magicka. You put it into the Mage. If you're using a Necropotence build, and for whatever reason you're using a secondary set into crit, you might find yourself with a situation where if you have way too much crit, you have way too much max Magicka, and you've already put your stats into, you know, your Elfborn, and then you don't have a problem with penetration because the group is providing penetration, or you got just specific, because the boss sometimes you don't have a lot of resistances. Then you want to put into the Mage, okay? And some people are already beginning to do this. And in some situations where you want your pets are top of your DPS parts, putting into the Mage is better than stacking more of anything else, or into spell power. Because remember, pets. Okay, so pets, they only get buffed by max Magicka. So I'll go ahead and end this video as part 2, and then we'll talk about the odd little exceptions that's to do with stat increasing for particular skills.